The smell of barbecue smoke drifted through the air, a thick, mouth-watering scent that would have made any normal person's stomach growl. But for Jake, it sent a jolt of panic through his chest. He wasn't hungry. He was terrified, because he knew that somewhere in the middle of all that delicious grilling was something that shouldn't be there. Something that had 4 tiny hooves, a fluffy white coat, and the most innocent, big-eyed stare. Marshmallow, his baby goat. Just this morning, Marshmallow had been safe in his pen, happily chewing on a piece of old rope like it was the greatest treasure on earth. Now he was gone. No broken locks, no tracks leading into the woods, no sign of a struggle. Just gone. Jake had searched the entire farm, checked every corner of the barn, even crawled under his truck in case the little troublemaker had decided to take a nap in the shade. But deep down, he knew this was an accident. Someone had taken him. And then Mr. Henderson, his ever-watchful, always nosy neighbor, had appeared at the fence, chewing on a toothpick like he was a bearer of some deep, ancient wisdom. "Saw your fancy little goat this morning," he'd said. Karen was carrying him like a sack o' potatoes. Looked real pleased with herself, too. Jake's stomach had dropped. Karen. Of course it was Karen. His neighbor. His nemesis. The self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac. The woman who once called the cops because his rooster crowed too loudly in the morning. The woman who had tried a petition against his unsightly farm aesthetic because she thought it was driving down property values. The woman who had stolen his baby goat. Now, as Jake peered over the ridiculously high wooden fence that separated his property from Karen's, his worst fears were confirmed. There, right next to her overpriced outdoor kitchen setup, tied to a metal post like some kind of farmyard decoration, was Marshmallow. The little goat looked confused but unharmed, occasionally letting out a small, nervous bleat. And just a few feet away, Karen and her overly dressed guests clinked glasses of wine, laughing as a chef in a ridiculous white hat flipped something over a sizzling grill. Jake's heart pounded. He had to get Marshmallow out of there. Now, but as he gripped the top of the fence, ready to hoist himself over, a shrill voice sliced through the air. Well, if it isn't Farmer Jake. Karen stood there, a smug smile stretched across her perfectly lipstick face. She held a glass of wine in one hand, the other perched on her hip like she had just won some kind of neighborhood dispute. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Jake clenched his fists, trying to keep his temper in check. "Give me back my goat, Karen." She laughed. The kind of laugh that made his blood boil. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I found him wandering around near the road. Thought I'd save him before he got hurt." "That's funny," Jake shot back, "because my fence is still locked and my cameras didn't pick up any wandering." Karen waved a dismissive hand. "Technicalities. Anyway, you should be grateful. We're throwing a beautiful little barbecue, and I figured he'd make a wonderful addition." Jake's stomach twisted. "You mean—" "Oh, don't look so shocked," she said, rolling her eyes. "People eat goat all the time. It's a delicacy." Marshmallow let out another nervous bleat, as if he understood exactly what she meant. Jake could feel his pulse in his ears. He was going to lose it. He was going to grab that wine glass out of her hand and dump it straight over her head. But no, that wouldn't help. He needed a plan. Taking a deep breath, he forced a calm he definitely did not feel. "All right, Karen, let's be reasonable. That goat belongs to me. You can't just steal him and—" "Oh, please," she interrupted, taking a slow sip of her wine. "It's just a goat." Jake's vision blurred with rage. Just a goat? Just a goat? He had raised Marshmallow from the moment he was born. He had stayed up all night during a storm when the little guy got sick. He had built him his own personal play structure, complete with ramps and a tiny slide. This wasn't just a goat. This was his family. Karen smirked. "Look, you're welcome to stay. We've got plenty of food. You might even enjoy it." Jake inhaled sharply, forcing himself to think. Storming in and grabbing Marshmallow was an option. Karen would call the cops in a heartbeat and somehow make herself the victim. No, he needed something better. Then, like a gift from the heavens, he spotted something in the corner of Karen's backyard, a decorative sign perched on a table, proudly displaying a QR code. "Follow my exclusive barbecue experience on social media." Jake's mind started spinning. Karen loved attention. She lived for it. If he played his cards right, he could use that against her. He took a step back, forcing a slow smirk onto his face. You know what, Karen? You're right. Maybe I am overreacting. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, yeah, he said, crossing his arms. I mean, if this is such a high-class event, I should be honored that my goat is the star of the show. I bet your online followers would love to see this. Karen's smirk widened. Obviously, I have some very important people watching. Perfect. That was exactly what he needed to hear. Well then, Jake said, pulling out his phone, let's make sure everyone sees it. He scanned the QR code, quickly finding her live stream. As expected, she was bragging about her fresh, organic, locally sourced meal. The chat was full of comments. People asking about the food, the setting, the recipes. Jake didn't hesitate. He took a screenshot of Marshmallow, still tied up, and uploaded it to every local group he could find. Breaking. Karen from Maple Street stole my baby goat and is about to cook him live on camera. Somebody stopped this madness. Then he pulled up his contacts and made 2 quick calls. The first, to a local animal rights group that took issues like this very seriously. The second, to the cops, because unlike Karen, he actually had proof of theft. Karen was still obliviously gloating when he put his phone away. You know, Jake said, barely containing his grin, I think this is going to be your most popular barbecue yet. Because in exactly 10 minutes, this entire party was about to explode. Karen had no idea what was coming. As she sipped her wine, blissfully unaware of the chaos that was about to unfold, Jake leaned against the fence, watching everything like a man who had just set the world's most satisfying trap. The live stream was still running, and within minutes, the comment section was on fire. Messages flooded in, ranging from confused onlookers wondering if this was a joke to full-blown outrage from animal lovers who were already tagging authorities. But Jake wasn't going to leave everything to chance. He needed to make sure this disaster hit Karen in the most spectacular way possible. That was where Lisa and Timmy came in. Lisa, his childhood best friend and an expert in stirring up trouble when necessary, had already been briefed. She was currently marching up Karen's driveway, holding a tray of what she called organic artisan lemonade. But what Jake knew was actually the most disgusting, sour, undrinkable liquid she could create. Her job was to distract Karen, just long enough for Jake to get into the yard. Meanwhile, Timmy, Lisa's 12-year-old menace of a brother, was positioned behind a row of bushes, armed with a slingshot and a bag of marshmallows. Because if anyone was going to offend a goat named Marshmallow, it might as well be with literal marshmallows. His mission was simple: cause chaos. The moment Lisa rang the doorbell, Jake slipped through the side gate, careful to stay low. Karen's guests were too busy mingling to notice him. Marshmallow was still tied up, looking utterly unimpressed with the entire situation. Jake crept toward him, whispering, "All right, buddy. Let's get you out of here before you become someone's main course." Then, right on cue, Lisa's voice rang out from the front. "Good evening, everyone. Would you like to try some hand squeeze, ethically sourced, farm-fresh lemonade?" Karen, who had been in the middle of bragging about her party's exclusivity, turned around with an irritated sigh. "Ugh, are you seriously selling drinks right now?" Lisa beamed, completely unfazed. "Oh, absolutely. And let me tell you, it's so exclusive, only the most refined palates will appreciate it." Karen, whose entire personality revolved around being considered refined, sniffed. "I suppose I could try a sip." Lisa handed her a cup with an innocent smile. The second the liquid hit Karen's tongue, she made a sound that could only be described as a dying cat attempting opera. She spat out all over her expensive outdoor furniture, clutching her throat. "What is this? Are you trying to poison me?" Lisa gasped in mock horror. "Oh no, that was my extra bowl batch. You must have a very sensitive palate." As Karen gagged and scrambled for a napkin, Timmy made his move. From his hiding spot, he pulled back his slingshot and let a marshmallow fly. It arced beautifully through the air and smacked one of Karen's guests right in the forehead. The man, mid-sip of his wine, choked in surprise, spilling red liquid all over his white blazer. What the... Before he could even react, Another marshmallow struck the back of Karen's head, sticking to her perfectly styled blonde bob. She shrieked, spinning in confusion. By the time the third marshmallow launched, pure anarchy had broken loose. Karen's guests, now thoroughly rattled, were scrambling to dodge the unexpected sugary assault. In the middle of it all, Lisa kept apologizing while subtly blocking Karen's path back to the backyard. Jake took his chance. He quickly untied Marshmallow, scooping the little goat into his arms. "All right, buddy, we're making a run for it." But just as he turned to leave, a voice stopped him cold. "And just where do you think you're going?" Karen had somehow managed to escape Lisa's diversion, her face still twisted in fury from the lemonade fiasco and the marshmallow attack. Her eyes locked onto Marshmallow, and Jake could see the realization dawning on her face. "You think you can just waltz in here and take him back?" she snapped. Jake didn't flinch. "You mean take back the animal you stole from me?" "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing." Karen let out a dramatic scoff. "Oh, please. This is ridiculous. You're making such a scene over a stupid farm animal. Do you know how much effort I put into planning this event? The influencers I invited? The reputation I built?" Jake gave her a slow, unimpressed nod. "Yeah, you built yourself a real empire here, Karen. Too bad it's about to collapse." Before she could ask what he meant, a new sound cut through the madness. The distant wail of sirens. Karen's smug expression faltered. She glanced around, as if trying to figure out whether this was some kind of prank. Then one of her guests, still holding her phone, gasped. Karen, your live stream is blowing up, and not in a good way." Jake smirked. "Yeah, funny thing about broadcasting your crimes to the entire town. People tend to react." Karen lunged toward him, but before she could get her hands anywhere near Marshmallow, the front gate swung open. A squad car pulled into the driveway, followed closely by an animal control van. And, to Karen's absolute horror, a small group of very angry protesters holding signs that read "Save the Goat" and "Justice for Marshmallow." One of the officers stepped out, looking thoroughly unimpressed. "Karen Thompson?" Karen plastered on her best innocent smile. "Oh, officer, what a lovely surprise. We're just having a little neighborhood gathering. We received multiple reports about a stolen animal and possible animal cruelty." The officer cut her off. He glanced at Jake, who was still holding Marshmallow. "Sir, is this your goat?" Jake nodded. "Yep, and I've got proof he was taken from my property." Karen let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on. He was just wandering around. I was doing him a favor." The officer raised an eyebrow. "We also have video evidence from your own live stream. Will you openly admit to planning to cook him?" Karen's face drained of color. The entire backyard had gone silent, every single guest awkwardly shifting away from her. Even the fancy chef who had been tending the grill was now subtly packing up his knives, wanting no part of this. "Now," the officer continued, pulling out a notepad, "let's talk about the multiple health violations, unregistered event hosting, and possible theft charges." Karen made a strangled noise. "Wait, I didn't. This is all being blown out of proportion." Jake took a step closer, enjoying every second of her meltdown. "Yeah, I'm sure the internet is going to be real forgiving about this one." As if on cue, Karen's phone pinged with a notification. Then another. Then another. She fumbled to check it, her eyes widening in horror as she saw the number of comments, the furious messages, the growing hashtag #GoatGate spreading like wildfire. Marshmallow let out a triumphant bleat, as if celebrating their victory. Jake gave him a proud pat. "Don't worry, buddy. You're going home." And as Karen's perfect, carefully curated world collapsed around her, Jake couldn't help but think revenge had never tasted sweeter. Karen stood frozen in the middle of her backyard, gripping her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was a fascinating mix of disbelief, horror, and rage as she scrolled to the tidal wave of comments flooding her live stream. Each notification chipped away at her carefully curated social image, exposing her as a town villain in real time. The elegant, high-class atmosphere of her barbecue had crumbled into a disaster zone of chaos, sirens, and angry voices. Jake didn't even try to hide his amusement. He stood off to the side, Marshmallow nestled safely in his arms, watching as the destruction unfolded. The police officers were already moving in, questioning Karen, asking for permits she definitely didn't have, while the animal control officers examined Marshmallow, making notes about his condition. The protesters were still outside the fence, chanting slogans that had turned into a mix of Save the Goat and Cancel Karen. And Karen's guests, sensing the ship was sinking fast, were hastily gathering their things and slipping away before they got dragged into the scandal. Karen, however, wasn't giving up so easily, with the same unearned confidence that had gotten her into this mess. She snapped out of her trance and turned to the lead officer, planting her hands on her hips like she was the one in charge. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here. That man, she pointed aggressively at Jake, trespassed on my property. He broke into my event. He stole that goat from me. Jake snorted. You mean the goat you stole from me first? Karen ignored him. Officer, do you know who I am? She demanded. I have connections. Important ones. Do you really want to ruin a perfectly wonderful evening over a misunderstanding? The officer, who looked like he had exactly zero patience for her nonsense, slowly raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, I don't think you understand the situation you're in. He motioned to the animal control officer beside him. We have enough evidence to charge you with theft, animal cruelty, and multiple health and safety violations. And that's before we even get into the live stream footage where you openly admitted to planning to cook a stolen pet. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That was taken out of context. One of the officers let out a dry chuckle. The video where you literally said, this is going to be the best fresh farm-to-table meal ever? That context. Her face flushed bright red. I was joking. Obviously, no one was actually going to eat the goat. It was all for show. Jake gave Marshmallow a scratch behind the ears. Well, that's funny, because I distinctly remember you telling me I should be honored that he was going to be the star of the meal. Karen's frustration boiled over, and she turned on Jake, seething. You think you're so clever, don't you? Jake grinned. Not really, but I don't need to be when you're doing all the work for me. Karen let out a sharp breath, clearly trying to compose herself. She glanced around to remaining guests, looking for support, but they were all suddenly very interested in their phones, avoiding eye contact. Even the chef, who had been manning the grill, was now nowhere to be seen, probably deciding that his career wasn't worth being associated with whatever this disaster had turned into. One of the officers finally sighed and pulled out a small notepad. All right, Karen Thompson. As of now, we are issuing citations for unlawful animal possession, failure to obtain proper permits for food preparation, and hosting an unregistered public event. Karen stiffened. Citations? For now, the officer continued. But considering the overwhelming video evidence, you should probably expect a visit from a judge real soon. Karen's expression flickered with panic, but she still wasn't backing down. I'll fight this. I have lawyers. I have connections. This whole thing is being blown out of proportion. Lisa, who had been casually sipping a soda by the fence, chimed in cheerfully. Yeah, well, I don't think the internet agrees with you. Karen whipped her head toward her, glaring. What are you talking about? Lisa held up her phone. Hashtag GoGate is trending. You're already at 20,000 views. Oh, and someone turned your meltdown into a meme. She turned the screen toward Karen, where a screenshot of her shouting, "It's just a goat," had been captioned with, "When you try to barbecue the wrong pet." Jake couldn't help it. He laughed. Karen's face burned with fury. This isn't over. Jake gave her a slow, almost pitying smile. Oh, Karen, it really is. As if to prove his point, the cops handed her a folder full of citations and turned back toward their vehicles. The animal control officers, satisfied that Marshmallow was unharmed, gave Jake a nod of approval before packing up as well. The protesters, now that their mission was a success, began taking victory selfies in front of Karen's gate, celebrating their small but mighty triumph. Karen, meanwhile, stood completely still in the middle of the backyard, surrounded by the wreckage of what was supposed to be her perfect event. The once pristine white tablecloths were stained with spilled wine. Marshmallows littered the ground like tiny sugary landmines. and her carefully curated social status was going up in flames faster than the fire in her abandoned grill. Jake adjusted Marshmallow in his arms and gave Karen a final nod. Good luck cleaning this up. With that, he turned on his heel and walked toward the gate. Lisa and Timmy followed, Timmy casually tossing one last marshmallow over his shoulder like a final parting shot. As soon as they stepped back onto Jake's property, Lisa let out a victorious cheer. That was beautiful. I mean, honestly, better than I even imagined. Jake exhaled, finally letting the tension in his shoulders ease. He set Marshmallow down, and the little goat immediately began bouncing around happily, blissfully unaware of how close he had come to disaster. Lisa nudged Jake. So, how does it feel to have completely ruined Karen's social life in one night? Jake scratched his chin thoughtfully. I think I could get used to this whole hero thing. Timmy grinned. Marshmallow's the real hero. We should get him his own Instagram. Jake smirked. You know what? That's actually not a bad idea. Lisa laughed. Oh, she's gonna lose her mind if your goat ends up being more famous than she is. Jake glanced back at Karen's yard, where she was still standing motionless, staring at her phone as the full weight of her downfall settled in. Yeah, he said with a satisfied nod. I think that's a risk I'm willing to take. Marshmallow let out one last triumphant bleat, and with that, Jake led his little crew back toward the barn, leaving Karen to deal with the ruins of her disastrous evening.